So, this is Chapter 6, The Five Hindrances, a continuation. On to the second of the famous five hindrances, ill will. We are constantly tempted to fall into the error of being involved with our enemies. Because they are inside us, it is difficult for us to know them. We must, first of all, try to bypass them, and then keep on purifying ourselves so that they will eventually no longer be a part of our nature. The spiritual path, the path of purification, of emancipation, of liberation, is a path where we change our inner nature. Unless we start doing that, we haven't entered the path. Everything else is external. Only that is internal. While externals can be pleasant, can give a feeling of satisfaction, they will not change our inner nature. It is that change alone that makes the difference between a worldling and a noble one. A worldling follows his or her inner nature, just the way it is. A noble one changes it. The second of those hindrances, those defilements that create so much havoc within us and thereby also around us, is ill will or anger. It may be slight. It may be heavy. It may be actually pronounced or just sitting inside. When it is verbalized, there is a chance that the other person will also get angry. Then we have family disagreements or arguments with the neighbors. We have strife between communities, and in the end, we have war between countries, or in the whole world. The whole thing starts in our own heart. Therefore, it is essential that we realize the world is not other people. Each one of us is the world, and unless we find peace within ourselves, we won't find it anywhere. It makes no difference whether somebody else is angry, upset, wrong, or egotistical. It doesn't matter at all. The only thing that matters is what we ourselves are doing about it. There is never going to be total peace in the world. In the Buddha's time, there wasn't total peace. In none of the great spiritual masters' time was there total peace. On the contrary, history tells us about political manipulations and warfare, brother fighting against brother. The only peace that we can experience is the one in our own heart. The peacefulness that the Buddha found for himself had enormous repercussions in the world, though. He was one man who made peace with himself and with the world, and that peace is still available to us today, 2,500 years later. In his words and instructions, 500 million people in the world call themselves Buddhists today. Obviously, our karma is not exactly the same, but it would be quite sufficient if the peace we found in our own heart could extend to our own family. Even that would be a great achievement, don't you think? That would be enough. If it extended to our whole family, every last member of it, then maybe it would extend to our neighbors also, an even greater achievement. We don't have to become a Buddha in order to have some wholesome influence over others. But wholesome influence can only be extended when there is peace in our own heart, when anger no longer exists, when anger no longer arises. The very tendency to irritation only disappears in arahants, but having a slight irritation in one's heart is a far cry from getting angry or having arguments. Being resentful, rejecting others, feeling hurt, and thereby justifying resentment. Anger arises because one feels hurt in some manner or form. Pain has arisen, and the absurd human reaction, the natural instinctive one, is to inflict pain in return. Unless we become aware of that, we can't change it. Not everybody starts to inflict pain on others. Some inflict pain on themselves. They swallow their anger and suppress it, and it seethes inside. All that resentment, worry, and anger shows itself in physical ailments, lack of energy, depression, negative reactions, a lack of enjoyment and happiness. Very few people walking along the streets have a happy expression on their face. Have you noticed? You don't have to be here to notice that. You can be in Sydney, in London, in Amsterdam, or Paris. It doesn't matter where. It's the same wherever you go. Very few people have a happy expression on their face, and equally few have a serene expression. The hurts that we have experienced in life, with our constant reactions to them, give us the idea that we can eliminate the pain if we reciprocate. On the contrary, this creates double pain. It is another one of those absurd human follies, just the same as thinking about the past and the future instead of living in this moment. The Buddha compared anger to a bilious disease. Bilios. Exactly the same words for anger are used in the German language. Mir kommt die Galle hoch. The bile comes up. If you've ever had that happen to you because of illness, you know what it tastes like. If you've ever been angry, and I doubt if anyone is spared that, you also know what it feels like. It feels awful. Yet people get angry over and over again. If that's not absurd, what is? It's like hitting oneself again and again every time feeling hurt, but still continuing. The Buddha also compared anger with picking up hot coals with one's bare hands and trying to throw them at the person with whom one is angry. Who gets burned first? Well, the one who is angry, of course. He compared anger to a pond in which the water is turbulent. If you have rolling water, you can't have a clear and calm surface in which to see your likeness. When one is angry, it's impossible to know whether there is any purpose being served. Mindfulness is lost. One has forgotten all that. One is just angry. If anyone ever had time to look in a mirror when they were angry, they'd be surprised at the kind of face they would see. But nobody has time for that when they are angry. One is engulfed in the emotion. The Buddha said one of the first things to remember when anger arises is that I am the owner of my karma. Such recollections are extremely important to have at your command, to remember them at a moment when it's critical. I am the owner of my karma, so when I'm getting angry, obviously, I'm going to get the result of that. Whether or not the other person has done anything to justify your anger has nothing to do with it. There is the beautiful story of Cantvaadin, the teacher of patience. Beautiful because it exemplifies so well the non-justifiability of anger. The king of Kausala was a very rich king. The story also says that he had 500 wives. We must remember that 500, 1,000, 1,500 in Pali always means many. So whether he had this exact number of wives or some approximate number, we don't know. One day, the king decided he wanted to go on a picnic, so he let his wives know this. The cooks were alerted to prepare the food, the servants to get the elephants ready with seats and decorations, and the soldiers to get ready in their best uniforms. The next morning, the whole palace, the royal servants, and the royal wives set out. They came to the forest and found a beautiful meadow for their picnic. The king ate and drank too much. Immediately after lunch he fell asleep, and the wives said to each other, "Now's our chance. We don't often get to get out of the palace. Let's look around." They all trooped off and looked at the butterflies, the greenery, the trees, and enjoyed the beauty of the forest. Very soon they came to a little bark hut in front of which sat a very famous old sage, who they recognized as Cantvaadin. Kanti, patience. Vadin, teacher. Teacher of patience. Cantvaadin. Okay. All the women sat down in front of him, paid their respects, and asked him to preach a sermon to them. He very willingly obliged and spoke about moral conduct, loving kindness, and generosity. Meanwhile, the king woke up, and there wasn't a single wife to be seen anywhere. He was furious. He called the soldiers and said, "Go! Get my wives back immediately!" They obediently ran off into the forest and found the wives sitting in front of Cantvaadin's hut. They went back to the king and reported, "Your Majesty, they are sitting in front of Cantvaadin's hut listening to a sermon." But the king was still under the influence of all that food and drink and couldn't listen to reason. He told the soldiers to chase all the wives back to the meadow and then tie Cantvaadin to the nearest tree. Since they were in the employ of the king, they could not do otherwise. They chased all the wives back to the meadow and tied up Cantvaadin. Then the king took a huge knife, ran up to Cantvaadin in great rage and said, "You old scoundrel, you've been trying to take my wives away from me." And he cut off one foot and said, "Now where is your patience?" Cantvaadin replied, "Not in my foot, your Majesty." Then the king proceeded to cut the old sage to pieces while repeating the same question, and each time getting the same answer, which increased his fury. When Cantvaadin was on the point of dying, the soldiers who had witnessed the spectacle said to Cantvaadin, "Sir, please do not curse the whole kingdom, just curse the king." And Cantvaadin said, "I do not curse anyone. May the king live long and happily." And then he died. The story says that the earth then swallowed up the king. The next day, the Buddha was informed of this happening, whereupon he said, "Who does not act in this way has not understood my teaching." The beauty of the story lies in the fact that we have a guideline. We have an ideal. Even if we were cut up limb from limb, there is no reason to get angry. That goes a bit far for us, doesn't it? Obviously, Cantvaadin was an arahant because his remark, "My patience is not in my foot," means that although he was experiencing excruciating physical pain, his mind was not affected. And that is only possible for an arahant. In our case, it's not possible. Our mind is much affected by our physical discomforts. But whatever happens to us, it is probably not going to be quite as bad as being cut up limb from limb, piece by piece. If we could remember this story and remember what the Buddha said, "Who does not act in this way has not understood my teaching," maybe we could see that the anger that we experience at anything or anyone is only a reaction to our own defilements. It has absolutely nothing to do with the deed or the doer itself. When we get an idea of that, we have a chance to change, but only if there is mindfulness and we become aware when anger arises. Mindfulness will act like the brakes on a car. If you have no brakes on a car, it's obviously going to be very dangerous. Without mindfulness, life is very dangerous. When you step on the brakes of mindfulness when anger arises, you become aware that there is a defilement. There is something unprofitable, unwholesome to work with. With this awareness, you already take away most of the anger's strength, just like putting on the brakes of a car. You can take away most of the speed and slow down. Understanding this as a defilement already slows the whole process down and can actually bring it to a standstill. As anger comes to a standstill, you can take a look at it and see its uselessness. You see the hurtfulness to yourself and the foolishness of making yourself unhappy. The greatest foolishness that people perpetuate is to make themselves unhappy because of their own reactions. A strong resolution is needed one day, maybe today, maybe next year, maybe next lifetime, to stop making ourselves unhappy, to no longer react negatively to whatever happens around us, because we realize that everybody is beset by defilements, and that whatever we experience that is not pleasing to us is due to a defilement. The whole world is full of defilements. Just look at the newspapers, the international magazines, like Newsweek. What do you see? Nothing but defilements. If we accept the fact that the whole world is beset by them and made unhappy by them, why not take a step in the right direction and try to stop oneself from joining in this unwholesome chorus? Why not step aside from it and watch it from the sidelines? One can do that when one no longer gets involved with negative reactions, of which anger and hatred are the strongest. People will never stop saying or doing the wrong things. Only when we train ourselves in Dhamma will we have a chance to stop. But we can't help ourselves. If we are confronted by wrong things, wrong reactions, wrong deeds, selfishness, wanting more than we are willing to give, what does it matter? The only thing that matters is the peace and happiness in our own heart. Everything else becomes a totally unnecessary problem that people usually live with. All problems are created by our own reactions, and we have the natural tendency, another of our absurdities, to blame the trigger. We get angry, so we blame the person who has triggered the anger. We get sad, so we blame the person who has triggered the sadness. Or we may blame the event. But we forget that it's impossible for us to get angry or sad unless we already have that tendency inside us waiting to be triggered. It could never happen otherwise. The simile I like to use is the Jack-in-the-Box, a toy for children, a little box that has a doll inside sitting on a spring. The idea is for the child to touch the lid ever so faintly, then the little Jack pops out. If we take the doll out of the box, the child can hit the box with a hammer and still no Jack will jump out. There is nothing inside. It doesn't matter what the trigger is, only what's in there that can come out. The only way we can find peace in our own hearts, find the pathway that leads to liberation, is by changing ourselves, not by changing the world. There's nothing to change out there. Everybody has to change him or herself. The Buddha did not deliberately change people. He told them how to do it for themselves. It's strictly a do-it-yourself job. Nobody can do it for you, and the sooner you start, the sooner you have a chance of finding happiness, totally independent of what's going on externally. Very few people in this world have perfect situations. Everybody has had something wrong in his or her life. Either the house is too small, or the salary too low, or the relatives don't agree, or the street is too noisy, or the food is not good enough, or the education is sufficient for the job one wants. There is always something wrong. Nobody has a perfect situation. Everybody tries to make it as nice for him or herself as possible, which is all right. But if we do not take a stand now, and keep waiting for perfect situations, we will never change. We can't wait for perfect situations because they'll never happen. The perfect situation can only be created inside one's own heart and mind. There it is possible. The Buddha said the human realm is the most perfect one for liberation. We have enough suffering, enough discomfort to spur us on to do something. We have enough pleasure not to become totally depressed by our suffering, so we are still in a hopeful state of mind. The only thing that we're doing wrong is we're always hoping for the wrong things. We're always hoping that the situation is going to change, that whomever we love is going to love us too, that the people who are dear to us are going to remain with us, or that we're hoping that we're all going to be rich, if that's what we're looking for. Maybe we're hoping to be so intelligent and wise that we will never make a mistake, always hoping for the wrong things. This hope in our heart can be put to a great advantage. It comes about because we know there's something wrong, and we're not totally depressed by it. We all know there's something wrong, but the only thing wrong are the defilements. That's all. Nothing else is wrong. What we need to hope for is that we shall be able to do something about them right here and now, and not in the future, because the future is imagination. Who knows what might happen tomorrow? Nobody does. But we do know right now when one of the defilements arises. We do know when we get angry. That can be known, and only that which can be known can be worked with. That which can be utterly and completely known, that is our working ground. When we get angry about anything at all, the first step is to remember, I am the owner of my karma. The second step is not to condemn yourself, and the third, to change the reaction. The most unpleasant emotion we can experience in our anger towards other is our anger towards other people. If we get angry at material objects, it is minor, not important, and not deeply rooted. Before letting the anger at a person become full-blown, where there's no hope of changing it anymore, there is a possibility of substituting loving kindness. People often say quite rightly, "But I'm so angry, how can I have loving kindness for that person?" Some mental acrobatics have to take place, namely, realizing that anger is useless. It makes one unhappy. It makes others unhappy. Not only that, it also makes a groove in the mind so that anger arises more and more easily. That's why we often find old people are crotchety. Everything about them becomes disagreeable. They're never happy because the negative groove in the mind has become so set they can't get out of it anymore. Knowing these dangers, we look at the person we're angry with and try to remember something nice that person has said or done. That can be effective because if we know the person at all, we should be able to remember something pleasant. Everybody does something nice once in a while. Everybody has some goodness in them. So bring that to mind. If we are already too angry to think anything good of that person, then remember that only an unhappy person acts in a nasty way. A happy person acts and speaks in a happy way and won't make others angry. So obviously that person you are so angry with is experiencing unhappiness. They're suffering. Have some compassion for the other person's suffering, whether they have a physical ailment or whether they're suffering from never having heard Dharma. One doesn't know what may be the cause. It doesn't matter. Have compassion for that person. If we're already so angry and can't remember anything good about the person, can't think about their suffering, we can try to feel like a mother toward them. That person's mother surely loves him or her. If we have any understanding of the Buddha's words, as the loving kindness discourse proclaims, we can remember that person's mother who certainly feels love toward her child and try to arouse a motherly feeling in ourselves. All these changes in the mind bring results. It will take a while to be successful every time, but by practicing continually, it becomes a habit, becomes second nature. And when it's second nature, one's original nature has changed. Anger, while still arising, no longer has significance or force, because one has learned to change it. I like that paragraph, so I'm going to read that again. All these changes in the mind bring results. It will take a while to be successful every time, but by practicing continually, it becomes a habit, becomes second nature. And when it's second nature, one's original nature has changed. Anger, while still arising, no longer has significance or force, because one has learned to change it. Who can a risen anger curb, like holding back a chariot, him a true charioteer I call. Mere rein-holders are other folk. Dhammapada, verse 222. Anger need not always be a strong emotion. Anger can be resentment toward other people. It can be the rejection of certain groups of people who don't think or believe or speak as one does oneself. That's very common in the world. It can mean rejecting other people because they happen to have a different skin color or religion. Rejection of a group of people is the same as hatred. There may be resentment of one's own lack of material opportunities. Maybe we blame someone for that, or resent our lack of opportunity for self-assertion because others get in the way. There may be resentment of one's own lack of material opportunities. Maybe we blame someone for that, or resent our lack of opportunity for self-assertion because others get in the way. That too is anger, and it's usually suppressed. One doesn't even admit it to oneself, which has major repercussions unless the anger is changed into acceptance and to being at ease with oneself. Suppression creates inner turmoil, which makes it impossible to see anything clearly. One sees everything from the standpoint of that suppression, that resentment. The Buddha advocated loving-kindness meditation and loving-kindness conduct as the antidote for this. Meditation as such is all very well, but so often it denigrates into words only, and most of you have heard the words so many times. Some people take the words to heart, many people don't. This is the danger of words. This is the danger of externalizing. Often we have the mistaken idea that because we have said the words, because we know the words by heart, because we've chanted them or listened to them being chanted, we've actually done it. All that's happened is that one has created in oneself an inner expanse of devotion to be used for one's working ground. Devotion is love, but one hasn't changed oneself yet. The words are only a landmark, a street sign. They're pointing in a certain direction. The Buddha's words are nothing except pointers in the right direction. They don't do anything for anyone unless one changes one's heart and mind. You know that we can change our hearts and minds. It's even embedded in the language we use. We say innumerable times, "I've changed my mind, I'm not coming." We change our minds many times. Why not once more? Loving-kindness conduct is something that we can do deliberately, but it's only a device to help us change our heart and mind. It's not an end in itself. It's a means. The loving-kindness meditation and loving-kindness conduct are both means, devices, tools. They're not the end in themselves. The end is the change of heart. Loving-kindness conduct, we all know what that means. Looking after someone who is sick, inquiring after somebody's health, visiting them in hospital, giving them some food when they're incapacitated and can't look after themselves. Being concerned about other people and trying to help them. The further one can reach with that help, the better. But one has to start within one's own family as a matter of course. Yet that's only a beginning. Looking after one's own family can just mean looking after the extension of oneself. There are many other opportunities for looking after people. That is loving-kindness conduct. Loving-kindness conduct should not be confined only to a small group. It should show itself everywhere. These are the antidotes that the Buddha gave to cure anger, plus noble friends and noble conversation, which gives us health food for the mind. All right. Those first two defilements were long, and although it's much earlier tonight than it was last night, and I've got my writing done, which means I can go to sleep sooner, and will be a little more well rested, I'm still going to stop here, and I'll read the next 3 defilements tomorrow night because they're shorter. Or maybe even tomorrow day, but probably not until tomorrow night after dancing for many hours. It's so funny to think of all of the time in this life I have wasted being angry. And the people I know and love who get into being angry and have given into being angry, and the people I know who are afraid of anger, and rightly so. Afraid, though. It's double anger, isn't it? I have to say, it's such an exciting idea at this point in my life to believe that I could train myself to live in love and not, give in to anger. So, good day or good night, and I hope you found this entertaining and educating, and may you be filled with love, and may you be free of suffering, and may you be filled with peace, and may you be happy. May all beings be happy.